Did you grow up with an alcoholic parent? I've been there too. And it shaped so much about us, especially how we handle stress. Today, we're going to talk about ways to reclaim our emotional well being and discuss practical tools that can help us thrive despite our past.
Themselves are children when you think about it. They just cannot take care of their own pain. So then they self medicate and use drugs and whatever alcohol to soothe their pain.
Amazing humans, welcome back to Connection Over Perfection. We're super lucky to have Lolita Guarin joining us. So, Lolita isn't just a best selling author, she's also an expert in managing stress. Her own experiences, like growing up with an alcoholic dad and hitting burnout from overworking, which none of us have been in, right? She's crafted the CALM method to help us tackle the stress that often comes from rough starts. Thank you. We appreciate you, Lolita. Today, we're talking about how the shadows of the past, like having an alcoholic parent, can still affect us, influencing how we handle everyday stress and pressures. If you've ever felt like or wondered if your past is still impacting your present, this conversation is for you. Lolita, welcome. We're so glad to have you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am so blessed to participate in your podcast where plenty of people can listen in and really find themselves in it. Because if someone can say, "Oh, I don't have childhood trauma," I think they're very wrong to begin with. Because as
Think we all do.
human experience is very traumatic. Just being born is already you start with the trauma. So
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you. That makes so much sense. It's interesting that you say that because I come from a very colorful background with lots of stressors and traumatic experiences in my childhood. So when I got together with my husband, he was like, whoa, because he came from like his parents got married, right out of high school. They've been married, the same people all their life, like what we would consider a normal family. And after many years, he thought I was the only one that really had childhood trauma. And then he was like, oh, we all do. It just looks very different. It just looks so different.
I say you can have two people in the room, and let's say something happens. Just talk about stress management. Let's say we're having a conversation, and we hear there's a big noise happening outside the door. We will react to it very differently.
Mm,
So, like, I grew up in the environment where, for me, being stressed every day, it was a normal experience because like my dad was alcoholic, so I was afraid to go home after school. When I was growing up, and I because I don't know what I'm going to find there. And it's a little bit different now when I compare here in US when I live here in Houston and I came from Lithuania. For those who are listening in and you're like, where's her accent from? Yeah, I'm from Europe. And so when I was growing up, I did not have a nanny or anybody or my mom or dad taking me to school, and there's no buses, nothing like that. I will walk to school. It was very close. But I'm also only one child, so I always had to take care of myself. So when I go home after school, I'm by myself. And it was very stressful because I never knew what to expect. Because it's like, okay, my dad could be not drunk today, or could be a little bit drunk, or could be very, very drunk, or not show up to home at all. And I think when he would not show up at all, that would be the best because we think, okay, if it's 9 p.m. he didn't come back home, this means he was so drunk that he couldn't make it home, which is good. That means we can just sleep in peace. But that was very, very stressful for me for other things that we can talk about it, but just itself as a child, it needs to in order to grow up a healthy individual, an adult, it needs to have a lot of safety when growing up, and also knowing that the things will be the way you expect them to be, just to be supported, safe. And that's why kids love routine, because you know what to expect, so you don't have to stress yourself. And what happened to me, since I grew up in that stressful environment, when I came here to US and I started working ungodly hours and thinking, okay, I'm going to find that tree where the money grows, and I'm going to, pluck all the money off the tree and I'll be happy. That was not the way to go, because I just burned myself to the point where my body really said, no, it's enough. The stress totally messed up my hormones. So, that when I ended in the emergency room. Doctor told me it's good that you arrived now because otherwise by tomorrow you'll probably be dead. And I'm not
Mm.
exaggerating. So I was like, okay, I need to start taking care of this. But that's what happened because I already came with the childhood trauma that to me be hyper vigilant and constantly being on alert and never resting really. My mind was never resting. I'm always prepared to jump, right? And then I have something that added on top of my everyday experience, like long hours, and how was to me felt like I was like normal like everybody else, but that lead to burnout. Like I was afraid to say no. I was afraid of other people, having feelings that they will not approve of me. I was afraid to take any self-care. So everything was go, 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 and to make sure that I perform. And that added on to the point when my body said no. But I would not recommend anyone to wait to the point when your body says no. When anybody's listening right now and they say, I don't have time for this. Listen, this is the time for you to start actually taking care of yourself before it's too late.
Yeah. I would even say that that's a sign that you you are in that space. If you're saying I don't have time to work on me, that's a huge red flag that hey, something needs to change, right?
But I also noticed I discovered that I was an adult child of alcoholic, and such a terminology it was introduced to me when I was already stress management coach, and I was just reading a business book
Mhm.
that they said, how to get coaching clients and all that was just the beginning for me. And when I read, the author said, "Oh, my father was alcoholic," and that was the first time introduced to me this thing that I was like, "Oh my gosh, my dad is too also alcoholic." And then when I started looking into what children that grew up in this kind of environment struggle with when they're an adult, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is totally me," and I needed to start doing something about that. But now when I'm a coach, I have clients that come to me and they're like, I'm burnt out, stressed out, I don't know what to do, but I don't have time for this. It's like, okay, so first thing is for you to know that it is time for you because you need to take care of it. And for those who think, well, I don't have time because I have family and friends and I mean, business to run. I'm like, who's going to take care of that family and business when you will be in the hospital? Where is that guilt of self-care really coming from? And when you come from that childhood trauma, you may feel even guilty of taking care of yourself to begin with.
Yeah, that's huge. I was going to ask you. So, the correlation between having, say, an alcoholic parent or living in that hypervigilance as a child corresponds with really overflowing into what kind of work ethic that you choose. It could go one way or the other, right? It can go to a coping mechanism where we see a lot of people follow the steps of the alcoholic or even drugs and really trying to make all of that stuff disappear as a coping, or you see it on the other side of the spectrum that really like, for lack of better terms, that perfectionist and having to always be addicted to that hit of cortisol, right? That stress and being hyper vigilant.
And I agree with everything that you said. And also, in addition to when someone grows up in a family that they not be seen for who they are, and that could include, of course, a parent that is an addict because they just high and they really cannot function. They themselves are children when you think about it. They just cannot take care of their own pain, so then they self-medicate and use drugs and whatever alcohol to soothe their pain. Any addiction is a soothing mechanism, really. So they cannot even take care of themselves first. So they cannot take care of their children. But that's also dysfunctional families, as of you can have a parent who's a narcissist, or also, let's say, parents divorce or some other traumas that happens to a child. So basically, if you grew up in a family where you did not get enough of support, feeling safe, and also not being seen for who you are, not celebrated for who you realize that, wow, I am not loved for who I am, so I have to be somebody else, or I have to be better, I have to perform, I have to please. If I'm not gonna please, then they will be angry at me, hence they will kick me out of the house, and hence I die. Because when you think this is all very, goes to the brain of self-preservation. And so this super, being perfect and achieving and overachievers, and I coach a lot of overachievers. It's like you're running constantly towards the horizon to reach it, but you can't reach it because you cannot be perfect. But that's really coming from the trauma of thinking, okay, my parent doesn't see me, so I'm going to be this perfect child. I'm going to achieve things. And then when we become an adult, like I'm going to have a very good job. I'm going to have biggest house. I'm going to have best car. I'm going to have those trips. I'm going, whatever you think that will impress other people or your parents or those caregivers that you experience that childhood trauma from, and then you just continuously trying to be somebody better because you're not even comfortable of being yourself because you think you're not enough for who you are, but also could be because you don't even know who you are because you never had permission to be who you are.
Yeah, you said so many amazing things. I'm over here jotting down notes. So, what I found too, and I'm not sure if you found this, that even parents that aren't alcoholics or aren't addicts or aren't narcissists, if they don't know the value of validation and really seeing and hearing their children where they are, you can result in the same effects. Now, it is definitely heightened when you add in alcohol and drugs and narcissism and things like that. I think you just stack more trauma on top of that. But I have definitely seen effects of, for me, even as a parent, not knowing this. My daughter's 22 this month, and I didn't know this stuff. And I definitely invalidated her. And I saw the effects of, like you said, her not knowing who she is and what that does to the psyche of not being seen and not being heard and not being valued as you are. And I think that that also in my generation, and I'm sure the generations before me, that to earn love, you had to be productive. And it wasn't like this conscious thing that they were trying to be mean or trying to do this. I think it was just a programming. When you got good grades, you were celebrated. When you cleaned your room, you were celebrated. When you weren't bad, you were celebrated, right? So if you did what the older people in your life wanted you to do, you were loved and valued. But if you didn't, you were grounded, sent to your room, you weren't spoken to, you were rejected. And so we learned that in order to receive love, we had to earn those gold stars. We had to do the thing. We had to be productive, which I think for me personally, I struggle with this still to this day. This is why I was like, yeah, we need to have you on the show because it's so tough. I still find myself trying to earn and prove even when I don't need to. And I've done so much work on validating and loving myself. It's just something that's so ingrained.
But also we need to realize that it's really going from generation to generation. It's like the kids always learn from the parents or for the
Mhm.
environment that they grew up in. But the key is that it is time to change now, and it's amazing that you see yourself as a parent that you can do this, and then like how that can change. Um, and because I don't think there is a parent that wakes up in the morning and says, "Okay, I'm going to hurt my child." That's not really
Right.
possible. So it's like because you just don't know, like nobody told you, nobody gave you then a manual and says, okay, this is what you need to do. And then also different environments, different communities, they process things differently. But also when we talk about stress management, we learn how to manage stress from our parents, like from the environment that we grew up in. So if we see that they very hypervigilant or they don't know how to regulate the emotions, if there is this blame, if they're yelling at you when you were a kid and you had no idea what did you do, you just came into the house after school and you're being yelled at because somebody's having a bad day. Basically, that's an adult who's really an adult child who doesn't know how to regulate his emotions and now just throwing a tantrum. But this kid who just came back from home who's 7 years old have to take care of this parent's emotions. So then the child becomes a parent to the parent who's actually acting like a child. But it is not coming from the place of, oh, I'm going to do this on purpose, but because We're never been taught how to handle our emotions. We all have it, we humans, and that's the beauty of this. Such a thing that we know we have it, but we're gonna ignore it. And such a thing as, I think, true self-love is when you're honoring your own needs. And now those who just got triggered by you need to honor your needs. And I've been triggered a lot of times myself before. And those who think, oh, how dare you? How dare you to honor your own needs? What needs you talking about? You need to take care of everybody around you. You need to be this martyrdom, right? It's so
Right.
celebrated. So what is happening, especially women? So the mother is being taught that as a woman, like, okay, you need to give yourself to the family, you need to sacrifice yourself. But then they have a daughter who grows up and married to the narcissist or somebody who's totally mistreating her. And then they say, I cannot believe, I thought you were smarter than this. Why did you marry this guy? Well, why does this daughter marry the guy?
Just a quick interruption.
Yo, word up, this is Ethan from the Nonchalant Perfectionist podcast. I'm so glad you tuned in here, man. Hold on, just real quick, did you know that this podcast, as well as my own, are part of a much larger world called the Podcast Connection Network? Yeah, we have some pretty amazing shows hosted by even more amazing souls. And look, we're just waiting to be discovered. You curious? Yeah, I know you are. Head over to the link in the description below. Trust me, you won't be disappointed.
Okay, now back to the show. Ooh, that's huge. That happens so
Because she's
often.
just exactly doing exactly what she learned when she was growing up. So those parents now who are listening in and saying, I don't have time for my stress management and I don't have time for self-development, none of this, I'm gonna just make money, that's how I support my kids. No, it's not about the money. I mean, yeah, we know it's not about the money, but really it's not about the money. It's about, are you there for your child? But when you taking care of yourself, this is how you teach them to take care of themselves too. And I get this question asked a few times by now. I'm from Lithuania, and I heard this question twice already asked me of, okay, so do you think that you growing up in, when I was born, I was still Soviet Union, and I was into my teens when Lithuania became independent, and I mean, I'm very grateful I saw that history unfold. But they like, okay, well, Soviet Union was so poor, you probably had nothing to eat, kind of thing. Like, no, we did had something to eat, okay. But it's like, how that's probably what's for you more stressful than, let's say, somebody who grew up in the US. I'm like, it doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter how much food you have. You can have the poorest family that they have an amazing, loving relationship with their parents because they've been supported emotionally, they've been valued, they've been validated, they've been celebrated. And then you can have a family who is millionaires, and I think there's a lot of kids who grow up in very successful financially families that, like, they know they're not accepted for who they are, they don't know who they are, they know, like, they have this theater that they have to perform in order to get the allowance. And I think it's even harder for those kids because if you start, let's say there's a poor family and there is a rich family, and the child thinks that, okay, I have to perform well, otherwise I'm not going to be useful, so they're going to discard me. The poor family kid, I think, has more chances because you always can do better, and you can get a better job, you can have a career, you can have a business, you can become this millionaire, let's say, right? What is the kid's going to do who's already in a very successful family? How far do they really need to jump to be happy and be seen in that family environment? So I am not surprised that what happens with a lot of with the youth is that there's so much of hopelessness because it's like how you can jump. And especially now with social media, there's so much of comparison, and, oh, you're prettier than me, you're skinnier than me, you this and this and that. And this is coming again from all of this childhood trauma that was generational. And the beauty of this is that we can change this as soon we realize that no matter where you come, no matter where your family, no matter what your color, no matter what your religion, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. Just be happy, just to be loved who we are, and just be accepted and be needed, and we can love other people and being loved. And from starts with self-love and accepting yourself first, but that can come with a lot of guilt because you came from this people pleaser family, from that childhood trauma that you are not allowing yourself to do.
Yeah, I agree everything with what you're saying, and I kinda just wanna reiterate it and say it back to you. First, that parent guilt that you talked about, that's real too, and that's a whole 'nother stressor, right? And for me, what really helped was the phrase, "When you know better, you do better." And, like, I lean on that because really there's nothing else that I could have done in those moments because I didn't have the information and the knowledge, right? So, for all of you parents, we see you, and when you know better, you can do better. And try to have some grace for yourself, as tough as that can be. But also, what you were saying is that the most important thing is to be emotionally present and available for our children and for one another. And I think that, I mean, this speaks right up to my alley. So, when I was learning about how to be there for my daughter, because that's really how all this started, I almost lost her because of that disconnect. And I was doing everything that I knew how, right? I had to take a big, huge piece of humble pie because my counselor was like, if you want to help your daughter, there's nothing wrong with her. You will sit in this chair every week and learn how to reach her. And I was like, oh shit. Right. And so what I learned is that I was not emotionally being present for her. I wasn't seeing her. I wasn't validating her. I wasn't hearing her. I was stuck in my own. And I mean, that changed my whole life, which is one of the reasons that I'm sitting here, is because I think it's so important. Like you were saying, I got to this point where nothing else really mattered except for that connection of making her feel seen and heard and valued. And so I get so many comments and judgments on my life, the way that I parent, the way that I do things, because they're like, "Oh, what about this, this, and this?" And I'm like, "Listen, I've learned the most important thing is that my child feels seen and heard and validated." So they may have some other shit that they're going to have to work out in counseling that I'm sure that I messed up on, but I'm going to focus on this because I've learned that this is so important. Would you I mean, I think that that's what I hear you saying, yes?
You see, there's also, yes, that's amazing thing that you're doing, but also, how can you really show up for her if you don't even know how to show up for yourself?
Well, that's what I had to do first, right? So that's why my counselor was like, if you want to reach your daughter, you're going to sit in this counseling chair because it's not about her. It's about what you're doing. It's about your fears that you're incorporating and trying to fix versus just seeing her. And so I didn't know any of that. I didn't know that my fears show up. And that's why oftentimes I punish and get frustrated at her because, like you said, I didn't know how to regulate my emotions. I didn't know what that meant. And I like to use the word honor because, like, for me, regulating is like it's hard, right? Because when we feel it in the moment, it's hard to turn it off or up or down. But what I've noticed is that happens naturally when I acknowledge what that emotion is, and then I can validate it, and then it just calms down naturally,
Yeah.
right?
It's been, I love there is a research on this says as soon you feel an emotion and you give a label to it, it really helps to release it because when you give a name to it, you separate it from yourself. So when it is separated from you, then you can deal with that. And this is what we've been taught not to do. Since you day one, you cry. Okay, well, boys don't cry and don't be such a wussy and all of this. And when you think about it, there's so much of a fear of abandonment that starts immediately from being born.
Yes.
So like let's talk about a little bit stress. Families, let's say, I'm not going to put any nationalities on there. Let's just say 100 years ago, families were living 3 generations in the house, right? So do you have more people in the house? Those families now today that we're participating in the research, those families who live on multiple layers, they could be different stressors, but the children being taken care of better because they always have somebody in the house that they can ask for help. They always been seen. And if, let's say, mother is busy and cannot cuddle, grandmother will probably cuddle you, or your aunt cuddle you, something. So those cultures or group of peoples who have a bigger community that is immediately can be touched, it is extremely important on the child development, because if you feel in the group, like look at the animals, all the babies sleep with the parents, right? And everybody's in the herd. Believe it or not, humans, we also are herd animals. We need other people. But when you look, now you have a baby that's, like, for example, I was born premature. I was 7 months, and I was immediately separated from my mom and put in the incubator for 2 weeks. Talking about fear of abandonment, I was immediately separated. And now when you look, how is the child even today being born? How are they being treated? They're being unplugged from their mom, being put it somewhere. Suddenly this trauma of separation is like, oh my gosh, I have to please everybody else around, otherwise I'm going to die. Like, this is a huge deal.
Yeah.
So you need to show this child that they're being seen, they being okay, they can get in touch with you wherever they need to. And when you realize that there are just simple human needs that we can take care of, instead of saying, how dare you, and stop crying, and you being needy, and all of this, and punishing kids for so many things that really don't even matter, because there's so many social rules that we punish kids for something that's not going to make any difference in your life as a parent. But then you, because you feel of a separation, you want to please the group. So then there's this medal for parents who are managing and controlling their children. It's like, you see how well my child is behaved. You give me a medal, and now I'm accepted to this parenting group because I'm doing such a good job. You see how obedient my child is? No, this is a serious childhood trauma.
Yes.
This is what it is. So it starts like from the day one. That's how we really need to do everything from day one.
That is so huge. And I mean, I think now more so it's being talked about, but it wasn't. And that's so huge, that trophy parent, right? And having those trophy kids, and like you said, the expectation of what to live up to, it just is unobtainable. And that plays into, us not knowing who we are, because we had to be what our parents made us be. Otherwise, we would lose their love. Otherwise, we would get in trouble, hurt, all of these things. And I love what you're touching on, is because from my experience and what I've learned, both clinically and personally, is these words independent and codependent. And I had never, ever heard of the word interdependent. And so in this society, I believe that we strive for independence, to make our children independent, which actually means that they don't need anyone. And so you create this generation of people who don't need anybody, but they actually do, because, like you said, we are created for connection. We cannot get away from that, because I believe to the core of everybody's issue, I mean, there's lots of other things stacked on top, but what you said, the root, the very root, is that fear of abandonment. And that is because we are created for connection. And so what happens is, I think that oftentimes, just like that pendulum of perfectionism and, say, that coping mechanism, is we try to create people, children, raise them to where they don't need anybody, which goes to the opposite side, and they become codependent, and they need somebody all of the time, because they're seeking that, like you said, that validation, to be seen, to be heard, to feel safe. And I think the goal really is that interdependence is really, like you were saying, our children are made to be near us, to feel safe. And when they feel safe, they're going to feel safer to step out and be who they are in this world. And so oftentimes you hear now that parents are the child's first bully, because they're trying to prepare them for the world. But in what they do, that doesn't work, because then now that the safe people, us as the parents who are supposed to be safe, making them feel seen and heard, are now unsafe. And now they have nowhere to feel safe.
And that's what the childhood trauma from having an addict in the family and having a narcissist in the family is. And then you just grow up with this constant hypervigilance, like I did, of thinking if I'm not even safe in my own family, I understand that the rest of the world is the same as well too. And what the sad part is that if I am gonna hold my hand to everybody else coming into my life, the good people, let's say, who could nurture me, it's gonna feel to me so weird because to me pain was love.
Oh, that's
So then I
huge.
will be fine. I will like reach out the relationships that actually misjudge, like they invalidate me and they hurt me, because that's was my normal. Like that's my normal. I thrive in it. Like, okay, you hurt me, that means you love me. So then when something comes better into my life, I don't trust it. It looks very weird. So then I am not able to have relationships that actually fulfill me and helps me to feel loved and helps me to be validated, which is really serves my human need. But I am afraid of that because that's not normal to me. And then I stick with the relationships that they hurting me, and at the same time I do not feel loved, so my need is not being met, and then I feel super lonely. One thing I always say, no matter where you go, you take yourself with you. Well, I think for those who grew up in childhood trauma is no matter where you go, you still can abandon yourself. And what I mean by this is like when you grow up in the environment that who you are is not enough, and you are afraid even to show yourself, you separate that part from yourself, and then you're not displaying fully yourself to the people because you're afraid to show yourself. You know, if of course if you find out who you are to begin with. So then when you're meeting somebody, you're not displaying yourself, you're displaying who you want them to see. So when somebody tells you, hey, I love you, you're like, I don't think so. You don't love me because you don't even know me who I am. How can you love me? So that's how you separate yourself from everybody else and you create more of this loneliness. And I think the true pandemic right now is the loneliness because we're not feeling connected to the people. You could be sitting in the same room with the family members that you grew up with, and you feel like out of space, like this is not the people who you want to hang out with. I mean, how many big cities that we have millions of people living, and you have a lot of addiction to drugs and all of this suiting mechanism because the pain is so hard to carry that we don't want to feel this anymore. And another thing that I invite everyone to ask themselves now, how do you abandon yourself? And you can think like, well, this is ridiculous. I always go with myself everywhere I go, right? How are you going to abandon yourself? Look how you grow up and how they were talking to you. You talking to yourself the same way. You're behaving with yourself the same way. And you know how they say, well, you just don't listen to those negative thoughts in your mind, and you tell them, you know, the complainer and the parent figure in your mind. Yes, this is there, but also for simple things like, for example, you feel an impulse, like you want, let's say you want to go and do something, or you don't want to do something. Or let's just say, I say you cannot bulldoze yourself into success. So let's say, okay, I need to go work out. I'm like, okay, I want to go work out. But then I don't really feel like I want to work out because I don't feel emotionally or physically well today. But I'm going to be like, oh no, I have to do this. You know, the overachiever. I'm going to do this. I have to pound this. And there's so many people, those success gurus, that tell you how you have to pound yourself into success. Like you have to beat yourself to pulp to be successful. I do not agree with that. It's like you're just basically bullying yourself. So I invite my clients, I'm like, if you don't feel like working out today, please don't. Because when you honor your needs, you are standing by yourself and you supporting yourself as you should be supporting yourself. Do not abandon the same way as your parents did. You know, they were abandoning your needs because they wanted to be accepted. They wanted to be seen like, you know, trophy parent, having kids, amazing, whatever, something. Don't abandon yourself in small things. Make sure all your human needs, and I say, I think I love the Bashar said 7 human needs, you know, the regular, like make sure you drink, make sure you sleep, make sure you nutrition, whatever. But I love the other 2 that, you know, I've never for the longest time we're thinking. You need to be connected to the group. You need to be connected to God, to spirit, to something. So you do not feel alone because we die alone. It's just no way. The creation needs to always reflect itself in order to understand who it is. We need other people and have relationships with others so we can learn about ourselves. And, I had this conversation with somebody who was a new member in AA, and they said, oh, I've been told that since now I started the journey of sobriety, I should not be having any relationships. And I was like, this is the most stupid thing I ever heard. So you're going to isolate yourself now. You're going to even worse. It's worse. So you need to heal. You need to heal. You need to be among people. You need to be accepted. You need to be seen. You need to learn about yourself more through other people. And now you're going to isolate yourself. You're going to neglect all your needs. So basically, you're punishing yourself for punishing. Like this is so messed up in the head. And also, there's another thing is like you need to work on yourself first, and you need to love yourself first, and then you can find a guy or whatever relationship. It's like no, you're going to learn about yourself. You're going to heal yourself in the relationships. So every time you have a bad relationship that hurts you, you learn more about yourself. Do not abandon yourself and do not isolate yourself, please.
I like mic drop. We could just be done. What you just said, everything gave me chills, made me want to cry, made me want to be like, yes, exactly. Scream that from the rooftops because yes, we are in such a society of disconnect. And I often find this even in the spiritual realm of you only need yourself or you only need God, right? And we forget that we need all three. We need validation from our higher, we need validation from ourselves, and we need validation from others. That's how we were created. Like, I don't care which way you try to twist it. We want and need all of those. We may try to turn them off and cope in different ways, but so much of what you said, like I'm almost speechless because I haven't really heard very many people, I'm going to get emotional, speak the way that you're speaking. And I'm so passionate about it because I found this to be so true. And I want so many people to understand exactly what you're saying is that there are no fucking supposed to be's. There's no supposed to be's. It's you have to figure out what feels right for you and learn in that process. And like you were saying, we never were allowed to do that as children. We skipped that experience. And so we have to do that as an adult, right? And oftentimes I think that we're guided to isolate to save us from painful experiences. That's not where the magic happens. The magic happens when we go through shit, when we learn in that, when we sit and when we feel that pain. And here's the kicker. When we're in that pain and we have a new corrective emotional experience in that pain, that's when change happens. When we're validated in our pain, when we're seen by ourselves, by others, when we receive it spiritually, that's when the shift begins to happen. But if we prevent those triggers, if we prevent being in those messy, painful situations, we miss the opportunities to have that new emotional experience to get to where we want to go.
And when we allow ourselves to just be whoever we are, that moment, even if we angry, just allow yourself to be angry. Even looks like like for example, my dad will get angry when he was drunk. So for me to get angry was a very scary thing. And I remember multiple times when, of course, I will be angry as a child, as a teenager. And my mom would say, how dare you? Like, you do not display angriness. I got punished for that. What is anger? Anger when you feel that you are out of control and is threatening your own survival. That is the last resort when you cannot control the situation. So naturally, you will have a child who is feeling like me, not safe, and I cannot control my dad. So of course I'm going to be angry. And the beauty of this is we need to understand, and I tell everyone who's listening now, you did nothing wrong. Okay. It's not your thoughts.
It's not what's wrong with us, it's what happened to us.
Exactly. And it's like you did everything that you could and you have a right to be pissed. Okay.
And I think it's when we're
Did-
scared, right? Like you're talking about that anger. And I've been talking about anger for weeks now because it's this taboo thing that we're not supposed to be angry. And I think it's the first process of of any healing, grief, anything like that. Because really what's under anger is that extreme fear, sadness, scared, right? But I think the fear comes in that if we allow ourselves to feel that, then we are going to act, say, such as our parents did, or that we're never going to come out of it. And I don't know about for you or what you would tell our listeners, but for me, what I found is the more that I honor feeling that, the grip of it lets go and I don't stay there as long. And for me, one tool that I really love is I'm a timer whore. Like I literally have timers everywhere, partly because of my perfectionism that I work on, but also because it allows me to feel and sit in the ick and the pain. But then I have a physical reminder, a pattern interrupt, like, okay, you don't have to stay there. Now you can go do something else. But I'm honoring that emotion, even if it's some people could only sit in it for like 30 seconds or a minute, and then working up to allowing yourself to sit in that. But it's very opposite of what we think. Our fear says you're never going to get out of it and you're always going to feel this way if you allow yourself to feel. What I found is that's very opposite. If we don't sit in it, it carries over and comes out and stays so much longer.
I totally agree with you. There's this one technique also I like, that you can take care of all the emotions that you don't like. For example, if you're angry, or let's say you worry a lot about things, right? I love the exercise that you have a diary, notebook, or whatever. You can put somewhere in the. You basically make a list and say to yourself, "Okay, I really worry about this thing, or I'm really angry about this thing now, but I am going to make an appointment with myself to worry about this, or
I love that.
be angry about that." And let's do that, let's say on Thursday at 6:30 p.m., right after my favorite show. Okay, this is, you set an appointment with yourself. And all a week, you know, every week there's something like Tuesday, something shows up that you're angry about or you worry about. You say, okay, all right, I know I'm going to worry about this on Thursday. So you're going to put it on your list. And then Thursday comes, you're going to be like, okay, I have half an hour. All right, I'll look at my list, and I'm going to worry about this thing. It sounds ridiculous, but it works. Why? First, we identify the emotions like we were talking before, right? You give a label. You say, okay, this is what it is. And then number two, you honoring your own needs. You do not bulldozing yourself. You do not abandon yourself. You honoring your feelings. And you tell yourself, I am going to take care of this, but I'm going to take care of this later. So, and then when you show up later, you build trust and confidence in yourself because you did show up for yourself. And that process itself, getting there, is already healing so much that when you sit and open that list and you're like, okay, I'm going to worry about this now. You think to yourself now, well, that's kind of stupid. Now, I mean, I know nobody's gonna die, or you angry, and you might get angry again, especially if something bad happened. But then you will start with a very good place because you already showed up for yourself, and that's number one self-care.
Yeah, that's huge. I love that. And I love what you said is it will feel silly. It will feel stupid. For me, it did. Learning how to take care and, like you said, show up. I love that you use the word or the phrase show up instead of love on ourselves. Cause, like you said, and this is so important, we want to let you know, guys, that we see you. Love means so many different things for so many different people. And we hear you, we see you. Almost all of you, all of us, love equaled pain. So when we hear self love, when we hear love, it's a very disconnected, very triggering thing. Like, we don't want to do that. So I love when you say show up because we all want to be chosen. That's what we just want to be chosen, right? So when we choose ourselves, yeah, that's so huge. And so anything new is going to feel awkward. So it's okay. Like, we're giving permission that it's going to feel weird. But try it out. give it a little bit of time. Try that. That's a huge, amazing tool. I absolutely love it. And also with that is, you know, how do we process anger? Like for me, right? You weren't allowed to be angry, but I learned that I can be angry and it looked different. Like now I run because I have to get that excess energy out because I have to
Good.
find a way to honor my anger that feels like I'm actually honoring it because sitting down and journaling when I'm angry, I will burn the whole book, right? Like this is not going to do anything for me. I have a weighted ball and I do ball slams, right? Or I scream into my pillow. Like I have to get that energy out, which also can feel counterintuitive because we were never allowed to do that. But those are healthy things. It's how we handle that anger instead of keeping it in and then blowing up at our kid or our spouse because they spilled milk, right? That's not any better than that's not better.
Right.
It would be more beneficial for us to sit and either run or scream in our pillow or do something that feels awkward.
Yes, but that's how all the diseases happen, like it's disease, right? The body keeps the score. And
Yes.
I read there was a research done that those people, like the women with the breast cancer, I think, that if those who are like very nice, they mostly were dead after some time, but those who actually were start having boundaries and start taking care of themselves and say, no, I am somebody, I want to be seen, I'm valued, I'm enough. They were getting better because
A
if
hundred
you're just
percent.
going to tuck it in inside and you don't allow yourself because you're so afraid really, or you never got permission to show yourself, you're just gonna get physically ill and die. I mean, that's just the reality.
Right. And I think that because it's not seen and correlated and talked about in Western medicine and in our society, that emotional has a physiological effect on our bodies, like you were saying. And I think that's so huge. Like right now, I see so many, especially women with thyroid issues. You guys, this is because what? It's our throat chakra. We're not using our voice. You're not speaking your
Afraid.
truth.
We're
Yeah.
afraid even to speak, because when you grow up you've been told shut up and sit down, and then
Yes.
if you're gonna say something you feel guilty that you're dishonoring your parents, you're dishonoring those generation to generation, and if you dishonor something you're gonna get punished and then you're gonna be excluded from the group, hence you die.
Yeah, definitely. So, can you tell us a little bit about your calm method?
So I use it on everything. It's my secret sauce, really. So really, it starts, so like every letter stands for something. So C is control, and I just can say right there. I can talk for hours about this. It's very important, and this is how it relates to our stress. Is that's why we're angry, because we feel we cannot control something.
Yeah.
In any situation, you think about, can I control this? And if I cannot control this, then you really need to let it just unfold. What has to do with control is coming from, from the childhood trauma, that we need to control, otherwise we feel unsafe, which is totally normal because nobody else around us were able to control the environment that much that we can be sure that we'll be safe because somebody else will take care of us. So when somebody grows up in a dysfunctional family where the child is so individual and takes care of itself, basically becomes a parent, the sad part is that they never had a childhood, and that comes into being way too serious about things, because you feel like if you're going to just loosen up a little bit, you just a little bit have some fun, you're going to be punished because people around you, they were all miserable. So when you're doing good, you're going to be punished. So you don't want to get there. Also, if you grew up with let's say like my dad was alcoholic, so every party looks like lots of fun and everybody's okay at the beginning, but then
Right.
the more drunk they become, there's fear of, oh my God, somebody's gonna get their nose bled, and the police will come and whatever. And there's lots of injuries and people being killed out of, of whatever. I don't need to preach on that. So when I grew up in this environment of thinking, I even afraid to be happy and enjoy myself, because then I will get myself out of control, and then somebody's gonna get hurt or I'm gonna get hurt. That's the control of, like, I want to make sure I'm controlling this.
As you're talking, I just want to point this out. because I think it's so important. Even as you're talking, I feel it in my body. I feel it in my chest. The words that you're saying trigger memories. And like, I'm noticing that I'm like, oh my goodness, I feel that, right? I just want to let our listeners know that if you're feeling something too, we see you. And I think it's so important. And like Lolita was saying, choosing yourself is really honoring what's happening right now, what's happening for you in this moment. And I know that we're talking about so much. And if I'm feeling it, I know that somebody else might be feeling it too. So I just want to kind of help us check in. Like, I'm feeling it in my chest, I'm feeling it in my shoulders. Like, I'm going back to, like, yeah, I have to make sure that everything is in control because I need to stay safe. And so, I wanted to stop and share that because I know that other people might be listening and feeling the same. And I think it's so important as a part of choosing ourselves to really tap in and acknowledge what's happening to us. All right, go ahead.
I'm really thankful that you stopped me and you addressed that, because it's very important to take the pause and acknowledge other people's feelings as well. And I think what that brings up, we need to always remember that other people also going through their own things. Other people also have their own traumas. And we preach enough about an hour about self-love and showing up for yourself and honoring yourself. Guess what? Everybody else doing the same. Everybody's doing the best they can. So that is where I can come back to my control is, so if you're stressed out, there's something happened in your environment. You need to ask yourself, okay, can I control this? And do I have to control this? Because if you came from childhood that you thought that it was your duty to take care of everybody else's feelings and take care of everybody else, and then you save and then you can give to yourself. Now when you grow up adult, you feel responsible how is everybody else feeling in the room. You may feel responsible how all of your co-workers feeling, how is your community feeling. You may get so triggered by watching the news because you
I
can't
don't watch the news.
watch the news either now. I'm like, I'm thinking for those who still get some tidbits of news somewhere, you can get triggered so much because you cannot control those people. But that's the catch. This is where you stop yourself and you say, do I even have to control those people? They can do anything else. And it is very different of having understanding and giving them their space and allowing them to yell at something. It's allowing them to display their own emotions. Honor their choice, the same as you honor your own choice.
And I love that you brought up questions because I find that that is so powerful. Is when you're saying, okay, I notice the control, right? And you ask yourself, well, do I need to control it? I think that that's that first step to self-awareness is asking all these questions. Why do I feel like I need to control? What's happening to me? Am I scared? What am I scared of? Why am I scared? So going back and getting to that root, because if we can validate, well, it makes sense that right now that person is yelling and I don't feel safe. Why don't I feel safe? Well, my dad used to yell like that and I wasn't sure what was going to happen. That was scary for me. That makes sense. Is that person my dad? No. Do I need to control them? No. Maybe I need to, move myself away. And that self awareness, because really, when somebody else triggers us, it's because it's not them. It's something within us that gets exposed, a pain, a hurt, a raw spot is touched, and that doesn't feel good. And so we're like, oh. And so acknowledging and understanding what's happening to us, I love that.
And also, what do you think? The people who are not happy and they yelling and they violent and whatever, that's mean there's so much suffering that they endured already. Otherwise, they would not be behave like that. This is like the last resort. I truly believe that only hurt people, hurt others.
Yeah.
So I invite, this when it comes to stress management, so much stress that we cause ourselves, especially if you came with this hypervigilance and you always like your natural state is to be expecting the worst, expecting the second shoe to drop, expecting, oh, what did you mean with this compliment? Like, what do you want from me? Just seeing the other person that's in front of you, that they also going through things, and having compassion and empathy towards others, and not overreacting right away and jumping into self-defense can make a huge difference. And I always say, you're stuck in traffic and then somebody cuts you off. How do you react? Do you immediately jump the gun and say, okay, oh my gosh, how dare they cut me off? When you think about it, it makes no difference in your life at all. Who made the difference is you. That triggered something in you, that you felt cut off by somebody else. You felt invalidated, insulted, all those things. But they coming from childhood trauma. The person that doing it in front of you really didn't do much at all if you do not react to this. Now when I'm in traffic and I see somebody cuts me off, I say, oh, they probably really need to go to pee.
I love that.
There's always a reason.
There is. And I love that you said, that empathy and compassion. I think validating ourselves and really honoring what we're feeling allows us to be able to do that, because we're in this, I need to be seen. I want to be seen. Why am I not being seen? We're trying so hard to get other people to see us and to validate us, which is important, but it's that pendulum is pulled that far back. But if we can validate ourselves in those moments, this is where self-validation, like, oh, this makes so much sense. It like dissolves the hindrance from being able to see others. So then that veil comes down and we can begin to have that empathy and see other people and what's going on with them. And I think I interrupted you. Can you finish what your calm method is about? I think we only got to see.
So you just, so this the C is control what you can, and don't control what you can't. So that's then the A is for acceptance. And I'm not going to talk more about that because we don't have time for this. And then L is for limiting. Basically, you just limit what doesn't work, right? And then M, you multiply by what works.
I love the simplicity of that, and amazing. I know we could talk about this for hours, and you are amazing. We appreciate your knowledge and just your ability to be so authentic and show up and speak in a way that really resonates with where we are. And as you were talking, I felt seen and what you were talking about, and I was like, yeah, that that validates me. And I was like, okay, did we just become new best friends? All right, I think so.
I also want to thank you so much and celebrate you too, because it takes a tremendous courage. And for those even who are listening now and thinking to themselves like, yeah, I know I was trying the best and just seeing yourself, it takes a lot of courage. Then also it takes a very big heart to create, let's say, a podcast like you, because you are creating the space for people like me to come and share my message. But the most important part is for people who are listening in to understand that, they're not the only ones. That was to me when I find out that I was a child of alcoholic. First I was thinking, oh my God, I messed up. This is it. This is the end of the road for me. I'm broken. But later I realized, oh wow, there's more people like me. And when you realize that there is other people going through the same things, and we cannot say that pain is equal. Everybody experiencing their own traumas. For everybody, pain is very different. But understanding that I am not alone, and there is way out of this, and I can ask for help to get courage. And I invite those who still listening in, I hope you are, you can ask for help. Please do ask for help. And if you don't want to get into like coaching or therapy or anything like this, you just can ask for help by calling a friend. Or if you don't have friends, you like find friends. There's, like now we're talking on Zoom and I'm here and you're there, but we made a human connection. And somebody could be living somewhere in a small town and they say, I have nobody to talk to. Guess what? There is an internet. You can get on communities. You can do Zoom calls. You can feel like you still belong. And you can heal because you really own it to yourself. You own it to yourself. So then you can shine your light and you become a person that can inspire others. And I think that's where the true change in life, your life, and the world happens when we start it from ourselves and we honor ourselves and we honor other people. We seen, we validate ourselves, we validate other people. And then it just starts rippling. So we don't feel so much hurt and we do not take so many things personally.
That's huge. So much. Thank you. I started crying when you were talking. I appreciate you because one of the reasons that I did start this was that, like you said, so the others didn't feel alone. We're created for that connection. It's okay to ask for help. And I know for me, coming from a hypervigilance childhood, right? An adult who was an alcoholic and, disconnected, I always felt like a burden. And I want to remind you that seeking help and asking for help and being connected to those that matter to you is not too much. You're not too much and you're not a burden. That's a whole other podcast, but I did want to say that. And also, just like what you were saying, is talking about these things to help us and others know that what happens to you makes sense and it matters and it happens for a reason. We're not crazy. We're not broken. Everything that we feel is for a reason. So, Lolita, I know that you help people just like me, just like our listeners, work through things like this and understand their stress, understand their emotions, and also really just making them feel seen and heard, which is huge in itself. Can you tell the listeners where they can find you, please, and your books, because you have a few amazing books out?
So those who want to schedule a one-on-one consultation with me to go to beamazingyou.com. And then so the latest book that I published, Stress Management for Adult Children of Alcoholics. And it's not only for alcoholics, but for pretty much all who grew up in a dysfunctional family. It's available on Amazon. It's 25 chapters. I talk about specific things that we may struggle with. There's plenty of exercises what to do. It's always, every chapter has a joke because I think healing it should be a fun journey.
Yes, I love that.
Every chapter I end with a superpower because I think whatever happened to you, it's great because now you have the superpower up to your sleeve that you can use it for yourself and others. Like, for example, one is always frowned upon is like, oh, if you seek immediate gratification, it's a very bad thing for you. I think it's a superpower because, like, I have no patience. That's why I get shit done.
Yes, I agree. I agree. That could be a whole other podcast. I 100% agree. It's just the way that our brains are wired, and it's okay. It's learning how to use it that way.
So I have other book, Crush Just While You Work, is also on Amazon. Basically, all the books on Amazon. Those who want to schedule a one-on-one consultation, just welcome to go to beamazingyou.com, and I hope to see you there.
Thank you, Lolita.
Thank you.
Hello, amazing listeners, and welcome back to Connection Over Your. Well, words are hard today.
So I use it on everything. It's my secret sauce, really. Let's say.
Well, don't give away all your secrets, but just give us a little tidbit.
Did growing up with an alcoholic.
The views and opinions expressed by myself and any guest on this podcast are solely ours and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of any organizations we are affiliated with. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as medical advice. As always, consult with a trusted healthcare professional regarding any medical conditions or concerns.